Welcome, everybody, to part three with Mehl Madrona, who is a medical doctor in conventional Western medicine. He's a prolific author. He comes from Cherokee and the Lakota background and lifelong participant and worker in indigenous medicine. So welcome, Lewis, to part three. I was hoping today that we might be able to hear a little bit about the work that you do, how from the experiences that you described in our first two episodes, that you came to come up with something very unique to share both with the indigenous and the non-indigenous world.
Well, you know, my great grandmother was um, a local healer for her community, and I'm sure I absorbed something just hanging out, you know, playing at her feet. My grandmother was a storyteller, and um, in medical school, they we got to see patients in the adult medicine clinic, and they gave us more time than I needed, and so I didn't know what to do with the extra time. It never occurred to me that I could just end the visit early. So what I started to do was to fill the time by telling people stories, and I started telling them stories like I heard my grandmother tell or my great grandmother tell while I was growing up, and stories that I was hearing from the elders that I was hanging out with, Gila in Ukiah, California, and Grandfather Roberts in Garberville, California. Um, and I just tried to find stories that would be uplifting or healing for these people. And one day, somebody asked me where I learned how to do hypnosis. And I said, "What's that?" And they said, "That thing that you're doing." I said, "Oh, I thought that was storytelling." And they said, "No, that's hypnosis." And so I said, "Oh, well, I better learn hypnosis since I'm already doing it." So I went after, I did a serious study of hypnosis after that. And I figured out that most elders are doing what the European culture calls hypnosis most of the time. And they're continually offering opportunities for healing through suggestion, through storytelling, through ceremony. And, um, you know, um, probably what the European culture missed was the spiritual element, that the spirits were involved in this healing work too. And and so you know, in those days, my sort of indigenous work and my conventional work were relatively separate, though in medical school I also learned acupuncture. See, Stanford, as I told you in another interview, had a much more liberal curriculum than Harvard or Yale. So I did a 6-week elective in acupuncture, and then did acupuncture a half day a week for a year in the general medical clinic. And so I was combining acupuncture with storytelling. And what I later learned was hypnosis. And so, when I got to residency, I just kept trying to take anyone who was interested to visit elders. And I found that translation was required, that I would have to prepare them to work with an elder. That I couldn't just take them unprepared into that environment. And so I started preparing people to go see elders. And that involved storytelling um, teaching tales and education about ceremony and doing smaller ceremonies to warm them up to the larger ceremonies they would encounter. So the first actual ceremony I did all by myself for someone um, was in San Francisco. And this was in I guess the late, maybe mid 80s, mid to late 80s. And a woman came into my office and she said, I heard you take people to the reservation for ceremony. And I said, yeah, I do. And she said, the closest I'm going to get to the reservation is the Hyatt Regency San Francisco. But I've got this arthritis in my ankle and I want you to do a ceremony because I know it'll make it better. And I said, gee, I've never done that. And I said, I'll have to speak to my teacher. So I called up Gila and Ukiah and I laid it out for him and I said, so, what should I do? And he said, anything. He said, she's already done the bulk of the work. Do anything and she'll get better. And I said, well, what specifically? And he said, just pretend that you're me and do what I would do. And I said, oh, okay, I could do that. So that's what I did. And she got better. But he correctly intuited that in finding me, and in the work she had already done, that she'd already laid the groundwork and she just needed someone to do something so she could point to it and say, that was what made me better. And Gila always taught me, he said, when the person gets better, he said, don't take credit. He said, you can take the money if they offer you some, but don't take the credit. He said, because it's like an avalanche. He said, it takes, maybe 100 snowstorms for that last one to cause the avalanche. But don't be fooled into thinking that it was that last snowstorm that caused the avalanche. It was every single one of them taken together that led up to that point. And he said, so always thank the 99 people who came before you when you're the 100th monkey that triggered the avalanche. And he said, and that's what you did for that woman. You're just a fancy monkey who triggered an avalanche. And so I started doing ceremonies for people when I couldn't get them to the reservation. So they got a little bit more elaborate and more elaborate. And the first sweat lodge or revitalization ceremony or Inipi Chaga that I did, it was because there were a bunch of us at a conference in Nashville and we heard about a lodge and we were like lodge groupies, right? I mean, you know how it is in Indian country. You hear somebody's pouring a lodge, you're like all over it. I'll go there, And so we drove like to this place where the lodge was supposed to be. And it was on a compound called the farm. And we didn't know what that was. We were stupid. And so we went to the lodge and these people were there and they were going to put marijuana in the pipe. And I said, no, we don't do it that way. And they got pissed off at me and they said, well, fuck you. You do it. And they walked off. And there we were, The rocks were hot. We'd driven, a couple hours. And I said, all right, let's do it. And I started the ceremony. I said, I stood up and addressed the spirits. I said, look, guys, I've never done this before, but we're not about to put marijuana in the pipe. I'll tell you that. So I'm just going to have to do this here thing. And I apologize to you guys if I do it wrong, or if I make mistakes, because I surely will, because they've never done it before. But we came all this way, and it seems like the right thing to do, so I'm going to do it. And so that was the first lodge that I ever led. And afterwards I called up Marilyn. I said, Marilyn, here's what I did. And she said, well, stupid, you did the right thing. What's wrong with you? you know, she said, you've graduated. I said, well, how do you know you graduated? And she said, when you do something like what you did, that's how you know that you're ready to lead lodge. I said, oh, all right. And it's sort of, I guess, that's how you know you're an elder, when you're the last one standing. So I know we're almost due to finish the wrap. But so what I started doing was this sort of blended approach, which I called healing intensives, for lack of a better word. And so I was trying to do this blended psychobiosocial spiritual approach with an indigenous flavor, and bring in indigenous people as much as I could into the mix. And I started doing it. I started doing it in the Bay Area, and then I really got serious about it when I moved to Arizona. And people would come and they would stay with me. I had a little hut, little separate structure that they could stay in the desert. Because in those days I lived outside of Tucson in the desert. Now Tucson has engulfed it, so now it's inside Tucson. But people would stay with me, and we would try and cover like the psychological, the biological, the social, and the spiritual. And so we would do body work, and we might do acupuncture, and we might do hypnosis, or storytelling, or ceremony. And whenever possible, I would bring Native people to work with them, or I would take them to ceremonies like at the Yaqui Reservation or on the Tohono O'odham Reservation. And so I just kept doing that, and I've been doing that ever since. And it peaked for me. The frequency peaked about 2007, I think. And after 2008, with the financial crash, because I had to charge something, because I had to take time off work to do it. And some people criticized me because they said, "Oh, you're charging for healing," But we always negotiated, and we, something that people could afford, and we spread the wealth with all the people involved, including the Native people. But money got tighter, I think, after 2008, so I started doing it less often. Not by choice, but because that's what happened. And now we have something we're calling the healing bed and breakfast. So we built this, we remodeled this falling down garage into a really beautiful healing space, with a sleeping loft upstairs. And so people come and they stay with us, and we work with them and bring in other practitioners, native and otherwise, as indicated. And really, we're just trying to catalyze transformation. And I don't really, and the problem really comes down to, I think the other thing that changed after 2008 is people would say, well, can you cure my lupus? And I would say, I don't know. It's not up to me. And they would say, well, I'm looking for someone who can cure my lupus. I'm like, well, good luck. I hope you find them. Or they would call up and say, well, I'm looking for a shaman. I'm like, well, I don't know any of those. And they're like, well, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I hang out with people and we do ceremony, and we sometimes sometimes the spirits will talk to us and sometimes they won't, and we kind of muck around and see what will happen. And they're like, well, no, I want to know for sure that I'm going to get better. Like, well, I don't know that. That's not up to me. So I've had less people coming over the years because I think, I don't know, the culture seems to have changed. And of course, we work with native people for a box of Marlboro. That was the last person we worked with. That was what she could afford. And that was all right, We laughingly say that we provide concierge healing services for the poor. So anyway, that's really, but I still do conventional medicine, and I bring the philosophy into it always. And sometimes some of the techniques like the hands-on work or, the storytelling, when I can. So that's what I do.
And I wanted to mention that this recording is being done while Louis is at the hospital. So any background noise is hospital noise. He's dressed in his hospital attire.
Yeah, I'm here in COVID virus land. Here's my stethoscope. I got a fancy new stethoscope. Yeah. And I got in my pocket, you can see my ophthalmoscope and otoscope. And in my other pocket, I have other cool things like a reflex hammer and a tuning fork. So anyway, yeah, I'm here in virus land.
Well, I'm praying that the spirits will protect you and keep you safe throughout all of this.
As I have been praying, as we have all been praying.
Now,
yes.
Louis, I'm thinking that some of the people listening might want to get a hold of you. And if they want to hook up with you and experience some of what you do, how would they do that?
Well, I'm Googleable, and I have a website. It's www.mehl-madrona.com. And rumor has it that it's getting rebuilt into this month of May to be snazzy and jazzy and cool. And also, they can just call me. My cell phone is on the website, but it's 808-772-1099, or email me at mehlmadrona without the hyphen at gmail.com. So wonderful. I'm easy to find.
Can you give us the titles of your books again also?
Yeah. Coyote Medicine, Coyote Healing, Coyote Wisdom, Narrative Medicine, Healing the Mind Through the Power of Story, and Remapping Your Mind. And they're all on Amazon. Easy to get through the giant conglomerate that is Amazon.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Louis. I've really enjoyed this, and I think our listeners have as well. So wishing you well, stay well, keep doing the healing on both sides of that spectrum, on the conventional Western medicine side and on the indigenous side, and look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.
All right. Thank you. Pleasure to talk with you.
And thanks everybody for listening.
This has been Cultures of Health and Healing with Robert Vetter. Thanks for listening. Please remember to subscribe and rate this show and share it with others. Until next time, remember, your health and healing matter, and you can find your own unique path to optimum wellness.